Good morning and welcome to this special 12 noon edition of Spotlight. Today we continue our conversations with Michigan leaders who are coping with and trying to navigate their respective operations through the COVID-19 maze. From popular convention centers to universities to nonprofit and philanthropic organizations to the U.S. Census. Everyone is reacting to the pandemic. Our guest today, Larry Alexander, chairman of the TCF Center Authority, Miriam Nolan, president of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, Dr. James Smith, president of Eastern Michigan University, and Carrie Eberso, director of the Michigan Census 2020. It's Palm Sunday, April the 5th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. The TCF Center getting national attention for what's about to occur there. Are we ready?
We're close to being ready, Chuck. There's no question that the day-to-day operational team at TCF has been working feverishly to prepare the center to add these additional 1,000 beds that will be needed to help out our healthcare community. And between the state and the Army Corps of Engineers, everybody is doing everything they can to prepare to accept patients. I will tell you the one thing that we have a need for is those PPE equipment. We have an order that we have placed, and unfortunately we're being told for our staff, not the healthcare community, but for our staff at TCF Center, we're being told that they won't arrive until April the 20th. And it appears that we're going to start receiving patients in the center either April the 6th or April the 8th.
And that potentially puts their health at risk.
Exactly. So we're reaching out to everyone we know who can provide or help us to try to secure some of that equipment that will be needed in the form of gloves or suits or face masks. We're willing to pay for it. You know, we're not asking for anything for free, but I have to be concerned about protecting the staff that we have at TCF Center.
And as I think you alluded to earlier, in addition to the Army Corps of Engineers, your own staff or the normal staff for the TCF Center is very much involved with this, because I know that's a union facility, correct?
That's correct, yes. We've got trades that have been extremely beneficial in helping to pull this together in what is being considered record time. You know, most of the time the build out to make this happen is about 3 to 4 weeks. We're doing it in under a week's time, Chuck.
When they look at our convention center and they're used to what it normally is, and then once we get past this, and we will get past it, we're not sure when, but we'll get past it, then you have to talk about how do you clean that facility, and will you spare no expense in making sure that that facility is safe for people to go in for future conventions?
Well, I'll tell you, Chuck, you're about a week late in asking that question, because we've already had those discussions. You know, we've got to get through this right now, as you just articulated, because we will get past it. But after the fact, we've got to be sure that we get in and sanitize and clean and be sure that every inch of that facility is scrubbed so that it's ready and equipped to go back to where it was prior to creating this new field hospital, but also that it's ready to house and for us to bring in conventions and the traveling public, because that's what it was built for. That's what it was designed for. And as you know, the legislature allowed us to go out and spend $279 million to equip this facility. And thank God that was done, because when the Army Corps of Engineers came in and they toured the facility, they were thrilled with everything that we have in place. And they went through their checklist and they just checked off and said, you got it, you're ready to go.
How convinced are you that when we get past all this, that the convention business will come back and we will be up to speed for a town that was on the rebound?
Well, Chuck, I always have to keep faith. Do I have confidence that it will recover? Absolutely. But, you know, we always have said, and you and I have shared these stories, when we go into a crisis situation in our country, whether it's economic or health crisis, we're generally the first industry that suffers, and we're the last industry to come back, because there's so much that has to take place in between in order for us to get to that point where we can recover and get and the general public will have confidence in traveling again. But
Right.
it will come. It's just going to take time.
All right, Larry, you said the key word, having faith, and on Palm Sunday, that's probably a real good word for us to cling on to. Thank you so much, Larry Alexander. And coming up, we'll talk to a good friend of Larry Alexander, Miriam Nolan. She is the president of the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. Stay with us. Anytime Detroit hits a crisis, probably one of the very first phones to ring off the hook is your phone at the Community Foundation. You have been through the bankruptcy, you've been through the downturn in the auto industry, and so many other times where we needed our nonprofits to step up. You haven't missed a beat, you're doing the same thing here. Bring us up to date on what you're doing.
Thank you very much. The very first thing we did was to ask 1,000 nonprofits that we make grants to tell us what they hear, what they felt, what was happening, and stay in touch with us. We immediately made grants to 4 United Ways, including Southeast Michigan here, and they're doing a great job with the emergency human service needs. And then we reached out to our foundations that we work with all the time and our individual donors, and identified what we saw as the current targeted needs that were not being met. And the Community Foundation has the flexibility across the region that we can try to step up and meet those needs. So we first put in place a fund on health issues. Mm-hmm. Then we're working on small businesses, those that are going to be in the neighborhoods and smaller than those allowable to receive funds through the federal new subsidies.
Okay.
And now we're thinking about the cultural community, but at the same time, we've put up a fund that anyone can access on our website to support those needs that just happened that we haven't anticipated. With our friends and colleagues at the DMC Foundation, along with others, have made $700,000 in grants supporting both what is happening with first responders and the healthcare providers at the State Fairgrounds in Detroit, and also in the 21 homeless shelters. We want to help contain an outbreak in those shelters, so testing there is really important.
But what about some of the smaller nonprofits whose pockets aren't nearly as deep? They have to be hurting as a result of this, almost needing help themselves.
I would say any charity that you care about, you should give to. Those who have had to shut down, even, let's talk about the cultural community. They have no revenue coming in and their cash is very limited. So we are seeing, as we hear from all of our various nonprofits, that they are furloughing staff. In fact, we talked to someone yesterday that said she was working even though she has been laid off because she said the needs are still there. So what we're hearing now, my staff they were near tears with the generosity of people, but the deep needs, particularly in those small nonprofits that don't have much cash.
Yeah. Final question. I know that you're having these conversations with your colleagues across the country, even across this state. Michigan is a very philanthropic community. Grand Rapids, same situation?
I've had a conversation with my colleague in Grand Rapids. They are also looking to what has happened and they think will increasingly be more difficult for them. So we are facing this as Michiganders, east, west, north, south. That's the way we look at it. And I can tell you the foundations that are partnering with us, and that's everything from Wilson to Knight to Kresge to DeRoy to the Facebook Community Fund and more. We're all in this together, and we all need your help.
Miriam Nolan, thank you so much for joining us today on Spotlight. We know the nonprofit community has always stepped up, and you're obviously doing it once again. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
And when Spotlight returns, we'll talk to the president of Eastern Michigan University. He'll talk to us about what impact this virus is having on the higher education community. We'll be right back. I could be having this conversation with any of our Michigan college presidents, and I would imagine the conversation would be very similar. A lot of talk so far about K-12 education, but we are a state of also higher education, and the world has been turned upside down.
Well, it is, and I think what we've seen most vividly is the moving from a very traditional instructional model to something that is totally virtual, very much unknown to some of our faculty, and something that's very comfortable to other of our faculty. So it's been a sea change in instruction. Obviously, all the activities that we host on campus have been canceled because of proximity issues, closing out the residence halls in a much earlier sense than we ever anticipated. Those are all just enormous impacts on not only Eastern, as you said, Chuck, but all the universities across the nation.
You wrote a very compelling letter to the EMU community on the front page of your website, and one of the things you certainly talked about was talking about online distance learning. This probably forever changes the way universities teach and communicate, whether it's for faculty or it's for students.
It certainly does. I think some of my colleagues that are in my age group are learning very new technologies. I don't think I would ever have thought I would teach with Zoom, for example, but we know faculty are doing that. We have things like you and I are doing right here with Skype. We have a Google Hangouts where we have lots of meetings. It will change the way we will go forward, if for no other reason that we've become more comfortable with a methodology that some of us never thought we would dip our toe in.
One of the things that I noticed on the website was the fact that you still have some students on campus, at last count maybe close to 500. Talk a bit about those particular students and why it is that they're still on the campus.
There's a lot of question about that, so I'm glad you asked. We have international students from 88 different countries who join us in a typical fall or typical spring. And some of those countries, you can't go home, even if you were a citizen of the Kingdom of Jordan, for example, or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They're allowing no flights to come in from foreign lands. So those students are, for use of a better word or lack of a better word, Chuck, they're stuck. And we want them to be comfortable. We want them to be able to do their online coursework. So we've provided housing for them. We have apartments that are townhouse style where many of our master's students and doctoral students live. It's their only domicility. They're here year round for 2 or 3 or 4, or in the case of doctoral students, maybe 5 years. They've moved their families here. They're living in those apartment complexes. They won't leave. The vast majority of the other students, unless they can't go home because someone is COVID positive in their house, they have moved out. So that number of 500 is down from 4,000 some. So certainly a lot less. And we anticipated that we would have a number of students that would stay on campus for those reasons.
President Smith, do you also anticipate being able to teach summer and fall classes? And what's the procedure? What are you telling your students who are probably sitting there trying to figure out, how do I navigate my way through this?
Well, summer is probably going to be online for the first half of our summer. We do a combination called Summer A and Summer B. Summer A, we will probably do the vast majority online. We could start online and finish what we call hybrid, where we would do some latter portions of the course in person. But that second summer term that gets us into the June-July block, we're hoping to be able to do with interaction, face-to-face, small group. Probably won't do any large lectures again until the fall. And we're anticipating, fingers crossed, and all the things that we can positively imagine, that fall will be normalized and back to as we typically do.
You have philosophy in your background. I would imagine for an academic institution, as bad as this situation is, This has probably been one of the most interesting life lessons that students at a young age have had to learn, many of them at an age in which we all were at one point where we thought we were basically invincible.
Yes, our young people are certainly learning a lesson about pandemics and epidemics that probably we haven't seen or studied in a real life sense since the Spanish flu in the early 1900s. So a very big life lesson and a very changing life lesson. And I think our students are very adaptable and they're learning to adapt. And some of them have said, I know why I don't take online courses now because I'm not a very good self-regulated learner. They've learned something about themselves. They'll get through this semester, but probably won't sign up for a lot of online courses in the future because they just don't particularly care for it. That's just a simple life lesson, but one that they've seen made real because of this situation.
Well, it's certainly something that none of them will ever forget, and none of us will ever forget it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hang in there, and we'll look forward to the fall and hopefully football there at EMU.
As soon as that happens, I'll probably be the happiest president around.
I imagine you and many others. Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Have a good day.
Thank you, Chuck. Much appreciated. Bye-bye.
Next on Spotlight, Carrie Eberso, the state leader in charge of Michigan's 2020 census count, which kicked into high gear last week on April the 1st. And welcome back to Spotlight. Joining me now is Carrie Eberso. She is the executive director for the census here in Michigan. How are you? Good talking to you.
Yes, thanks for having me back. Hope you're well.
Doing fine. Executive Director, since the last time we had an interview, which was just a few weeks back, the world has been turned upside down, especially here in the United States in many respects for all of us. I have received my letter from the census. I'm looking right at it now. My wife and I went online and we did it, and it took 10, maybe 15 minutes at most. Tell us how this virus has affected the census.
Well, I think first and foremost, the health and safety of everyone in Michigan is the primary concern. And yes, it has had an impact on some census operations. But while the U.S. Census Bureau has postponed some of their internal operations as it relates to group quarter counting and hiring at this point, but you can still, as you just covered, you can still fill out your census form online, or they have a toll-free number, 844-330-2020, that you can also call. So if you don't have internet access at home, you should feel free to call that toll-free number.
I would imagine you're hearing either directly or indirectly from people saying, look, I'm trying to deal with this virus. I'm trying to deal with all the things that have been turned upside down in my life. The last thing that I have time to deal with right now is involving myself in the census. Your response to that type of reaction?
I would say even per our last conversation, we talked about how critical the census count is to our state. And I think if you look at now, what are we following in the news as it relates to this pandemic? And that is populations, rates of cases, testing, etc. That all connects back to our population. We also talked before about how critical funding that the federal government allocates, it's distributed amongst the states based on our population count. Those programs, Medicaid, Medicare, health grants, are based on population. So once again, our community health, our public health is connected to the census. So now more than ever, it's a small 10-minute piece that you can do to help your community today.
These dollars and cents are going to be weighed in some way, shape, or form in a lot of different levels, and that goes right back to our tax dollars, correct?
We are currently in 5th position. We're ranked 5th in the nation in terms of our response rate, which was good, but we can do better. We got Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota ahead of us. So I want folks, if they're watching this right now at home, please give the Census Bureau a call or go to that website.
We've already made provisions to be able to delay in terms of when you file your taxes. The president has done that. Are you hearing any talk in Washington that they are doing something similar with the census, giving people more time?
Yep. So they've changed a few deadlines for their internal operations. Now that has not. They still have to complete the census. It's mandated by the Constitution, so we have to do it this year. We're not going to see a constitutional amendment, or I highly doubt that. But there are two dates that are important. That December 31st, our numbers have to be turned in to the president. And if you back that out, right now, the U.S. Census Bureau has postponed their in count from July 31st to August 13th. So that's 2 weeks. But for every Michigan resident, this is what I'm asking and pleading for you to do. Fill out your census by April 30th, because after April 30th in May 13th is when that door-to-door operation is now scheduled to start. So I think more important than ever that you get on, self-respond to that census form, either online or by phone.
Ahmad Hamad of the American Human Rights Council, I know, put out an email the other day urging the president to try to back things up at least 3 months. Do you think there's any chance of that happening?
Listen, what we're dealing with, I know I haven't seen in my 43 years as it relates to COVID-19. So this is absolutely serious. And again, the health and safety of not only Michigan residents, but those that are working for the Census Bureau are a number one priority. So anything is possible. But at the end of the day, this is where I go back to that April 30th. Even if they give us another 3 months, my experience is people work best with a deadline. So let's make that deadline April 30th.
All right. One thing that people perhaps should be a little concerned with, everybody is, keeping that social distance, not wanting people to come to their door, not interacting with people that they may not know. This is probably all the more reason to try to fill it out online if you have that capability, and to try to do it on time, because if you don't, you're going to be coming to people's door, virus or no virus, correct?
That's right. It's not just about the dog barking or your dinner being interrupted. If you want to have a safe, peaceful time and someone that you may not know from the neighborhood coming to your door, I encourage you to complete that census by April 30th.
All right. Carrie Ebersole, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully people are getting the message. We will get through this, and we'll make sure that we have a census because it's mandated by the Constitution.
That's right. Be well.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of my guests today. A special programming note. Next Sunday, which is Easter Sunday, Spotlight will also air at 12 o'clock noon, so our station can bring you a special Easter religious service in our normal Spotlight 10 o'clock time period. We hope you watch both of the programs. I'm Chuck Stokes. Thanks for watching, and please, please be safe.